The howl of the wind across the plains of Wyoming Territory couldn't drown out the sound of Lucy Evans' muffled sobs as she stood beside 5 freshly dug graves, 1 large and 4 heartbreakingly small. The year was 1879, and the merciless winter had claimed nearly everything she loved. "Ma, we gotta go before dark." 10-year-old Matthew tugged at her black morning dress, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. The oldest of her remaining sons had been crying for days, but now stood stoic, trying to be the man of the family. Lucy nodded, placing 1 final wildflower on each grave her husband James and their 4 youngest children, all taken by the fever that had swept through their homestead like wildfire. Only she and her 5 older boys had survived, but their future hung by a thread as thin as her worn wedding band. "We'll come back tomorrow," she promised, gathering 7-year-old twins Samuel and Daniel close while 5-year-old Joseph clung to her skirts. 8-year-old William stood beside Matthew, shoulders squared against the weight of their new reality. The small family trudged back toward their cabin, which sat like a lonely sentinel against the vast Wyoming landscape. Their nearest neighbor was miles away, their supplies dwindling, and winter wasn't done with them yet. Lucy didn't notice the lone rider approaching until Matthew pointed. "Ma, someone's coming." She squinted against the setting sun, fear gripping her heart. Strangers could mean trouble for a widow alone with children. As the figure drew closer, she could make out a tall man on a chestnut stallion, his broad shoulders outlined against the crimson sky. "Boys, get behind me," she instructed, wishing she'd brought James' rifle from the cabin. The rider slowed his horse as he approached, and Lucy could now see his weathered face beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with eyes that reminded her of the summer sky and a strong jawline softened by a neatly trimmed beard. "Madam," he touched the brim of his hat, "name's Ryker Nash. I was passing through and saw the smoke from your chimney. Thought I'd check if everything's all right." Lucy hesitated, measuring her words carefully. "We're managing, Mr. Nash. Thank you for your concern." His gaze drifted to the fresh graves on the hillside, then back to her face and the 5 boys clustered behind her. Understanding dawned in his eyes, but he asked no questions. "Night's coming fast, and it'll be a cold one," he observed. "You folks have enough firewood?" The kindness in his voice nearly broke her composure. The truth was, they didn't. James had fallen ill before finishing their winter supply, and Lucy hadn't had time to chop more while nursing the sick. "We'll make do," she answered, lifting her chin. Ryker dismounted, his movements fluid and confident. "I could chop some for you before I move on. No strings attached, madam." "Just being neighborly." Matthew stepped forward. "We can do it ourselves, mister." Ryker's mouth curved into a gentle smile. "I'm sure you can, son, but sometimes even the strongest men accept help when it's offered in good faith." Lucy studied him, weighing the risk against the reality of 5 hungry boys and dwindling supplies. There was something in his eyes, a quiet honesty that reminded her of James. "We'd be grateful for the wood, Mr. Nash," she finally said, "and perhaps you'd join us for supper." "It's simple fare, but hot." "That's the best kind, madam," he replied, leading his horse toward the cabin. As dusk settled over the plains, the rhythmic sound of Ryker's axe split the cold air. Lucy watched from the window as he worked steadily, splitting logs with practiced efficiency. The boys had initially watched him with suspicion, but soon Matthew and William were helping, carrying the split wood to stack against the cabin wall. Inside, Lucy stirred a pot of bean soup, stretching it with extra water and the last of their salted pork. She wasn't sure what had compelled her to invite a stranger to their table, but something told her this man could be trusted. By the time the meal was ready, Ryker had chopped enough wood to last them a week. He washed up at the outdoor pump, the icy water turning his hands red before joining them at the table. "Thank you for the invitation, Mrs." He paused, realizing he didn't know her name. "Evans," she supplied. "Lucy Evans, and these are my boys Matthew, William, Samuel, Daniel, and Joseph." Ryker nodded to each one. "Fine-looking young men." The meal was quiet at first, the boys watching Ryker with curious eyes. It was Joseph who finally broke the silence. "Are you a real cowboy?" he asked, eyes wide with wonder. Ryker smiled. "I suppose I am. Been working cattle most of my life, driving herds up from Texas to the railheads in Kansas, then out this way when the Union Pacific came through." "Where's your herd now?" William asked, skepticism in his young voice. "Don't have one at present," Ryker admitted. "I've been working as a hired hand these past few years, saving to buy my own spread someday. Was heading north to the Madison Valley when I spotted your place." Lucy studied him over her bowl. "That's a long journey this time of year." "Wasn't planning on winter travel, but the ranch I was working shut down sudden-like. Owner lost everything in a card game." Ryker's expression darkened momentarily. Didn't much care for the new boss. As the meal progressed, Lucy found herself warming to this quiet stranger. He spoke respectfully, helped Joseph cut his bread without being asked, and seemed genuinely interested in the boys' chatter. When Matthew mentioned their father had been teaching him to shoot, Ryker nodded appreciatively but didn't overstep by offering to take over the lessons. After supper, as Lucy washed the dishes with the twins' help, Ryker pulled a battered harmonica from his pocket and played a gentle tune that made little Joseph's eyelids droop. She watched as he carried the sleeping child to the small bedroom where all 5 boys shared 2 beds, laying him down with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "You're good with children," she observed when he returned. "Had 4 younger siblings growing up," he replied, staring into the fire. "Ma died when I was 14. Pa and I raised them best we could." The simple statement revealed volumes. Lucy recognized the look in his eyes, someone who understood responsibility and loss. "It's getting late," she said. "You're welcome to sleep by the fire tonight, Mr. Nash. It wouldn't be right to send you out in the cold after all your help." He tipped his head. "Much obliged, Mrs. Evans. I'll be gone at first light, won't trouble you further." But morning brought a heavy snowfall that blanketed the landscape in white. Lucy woke to find Ryker already up, stoking the fire and brewing coffee. "Sorry to impose," he said when he noticed her watching. "Figured I'd get a hot start before heading out." She glanced toward the window at the thickly falling snow. "You can't travel in this, it would be foolish to try." Ryker followed her gaze, his expression unreadable. "I've weathered worse." "Perhaps," Lucy replied, "but there's no need to risk it. We've enough supplies for a day or two, and you've already chopped more wood than we can use quickly." He hesitated, clearly torn between not wanting to impose and the practical reality of the weather. "At least wait until it slows," she added. "The boys would feel terrible if something happened to you because we sent you away in a storm." That seemed to decide him. "All right, Mrs. Evans. But I insist on earning my keep. Any repairs your place needs." Over the next 2 days, as the snow continued to fall, Ryker made himself indispensable. He fixed the leaking roof above the boys' room, reinforced the chicken coop, and fashioned new hinges for the cabin door from scrap metal he found in the shed. The boys followed him everywhere, especially Joseph, who watched his every move with undisguised admiration. On the evening of the second day, as they sat around the fire after the younger boys had gone to bed, Ryker broached a difficult subject. "Mrs. Evans, I don't mean to pry, but your supplies are running mighty low." Lucy sighed, setting aside her mending. "I know. James, my husband, he had arranged to trade with a merchant in town before." She trailed off, "before the sickness," Ryker finished gently. "How far is town from here?" 12 miles to Sweetwater, but with the snow." Ryker nodded thoughtfully. "First break in the weather, I could make the trip for you. Bring back what you need." Lucy's pride warred with practicality. "We don't have much money, Mr. Nash." "I wasn't asking for payment," he said quietly, "just trying to help." Matthew, who had been listening from his spot near the fireplace, spoke up. "We don't need charity." Ryker turned to the boy. "It's not charity between neighbors, son. It's just the way of things out here. People help each other survive." "But you're not our neighbor," Matthew pointed out. "You're just passing through." "Matt," Lucy admonished, but Ryker held up a hand. The boy's right to question, he said. Tell you what, Matthew, I need a place to winter before heading north in spring. Your ma needs help getting through until then. What if I propose a fair trade? I'll work your pa's land, help with chores, make supply runs to town, and in exchange I get board and a place in your barn to sleep. Lucy was stunned by the offer. Mr. Nash, that's practical, he finished, for all of us, but it would have to be with your family's blessing. He looked pointedly at Matthew. The boy considered this, his young face serious beyond his years. You'd sleep in the barn, not the house, of course, Ryker replied. Would be improper otherwise. Matthew glanced at his mother, then back to Ryker. And you'd teach me to hunt. Pa was going to, but if your ma agrees, yes. Lucy's mind raced. Having a man's help through winter would make all the difference for their survival, yet the thought of allowing a virtual stranger to stay made her uneasy. Still, something about Ryker Nash inspired trust. His eyes held no deceit, and he'd shown nothing but respect toward her and kindness to her children. We would be grateful for the arrangement, Mr. Nash, she said finally, but I insist on paying you something when spring comes. Ryker smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. We'll discuss that when the snow melts, Mrs. Evans. The next morning, the storm broke, leaving behind a crystalline landscape of untouched white. True to his word, Ryker moved his few possessions to the barn, insisting he'd be comfortable enough with extra blankets and his bedroll near the horses. The following weeks fell into a rhythm that brought surprising comfort to the grieving family. Ryker rode to Sweetwater at the first opportunity, returning with flour, sugar, coffee, and other necessities. He taught Matthew and William how to set snares for rabbits, showing the same patience as he did when helping the twins with their reading lessons in the evenings. Christmas approached, and with it came an unexpected thaw that allowed Ryker to make another trip to town. He returned with not only supplies but small gifts: a wooden top for Joseph, marbles for the twins, a jackknife for William, and a proper hunting knife for Matthew. For Lucy, he brought a packet of real tea and a small bottle of rose-scented lotion, luxuries she hadn't enjoyed in years. This is too much, she protested when he presented them on Christmas Eve. It's Christmas, he replied simply. And they're just small things. But they weren't small to Lucy, who had feared her children would have nothing to celebrate that year. That night, after the boys were asleep and Ryker had returned to the barn, she allowed herself to cry for the first time since the funerals, not just tears of grief, but of gratitude for the unexpected kindness that had entered their lives. January brought bitter cold and a bout of illness that struck Joseph hardest. For 3 nights, Lucy sat by his bedside, applying cold compresses to his feverish forehead, terror gripping her heart at the thought of losing another child. Ryker rode through a blizzard to fetch the doctor from Sweetwater, returning half frozen but with the physician in tow. When the doctor confirmed it was just a childhood fever, not the deadly influenza that had taken James and the younger children, the relief was palpable. That night, as Joseph finally slept peacefully, Lucy found Ryker still awake by the fire, his clothes drying on a chair nearby. "You risked your life today," she said softly, joining him. He looked up, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Couldn't stand by and do nothing." "Most men would have," she replied, "especially for a child not their own." Something passed across his face, a shadow of old pain. "I've seen what happens when help doesn't come in time." Lucy hesitated, then sat beside him. "Your siblings," he nodded, staring into the flames. "Lost my youngest brother to fever when I was 16, no doctor for 30 miles, and Pa was away by the time help came." He trailed off without thinking. Lucy reached out and covered his hand with hers. "I'm sorry." His fingers curled around hers, warm and calloused from work. For a long moment they sat in silence, connected by shared grief and understanding. "Thank you," she whispered eventually, "for everything you've done for us." Ryker's eyes met hers, and something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings neither was ready to name. "I should get back to the barn," he said, reluctantly withdrawing his hand. Lucy nodded, suddenly aware of the impropriety of their closeness. Of course. Good night, Mr. Nash, Ryker, he corrected gently. After all this time, I think you could call me Ryker. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes for the first time in months. Good night, Ryker. Good night, Lucy. February brought more snow but also laughter to the Evans homestead. The boys had fully accepted Ryker's presence, eagerly awaiting his return whenever he went hunting or to town. Even Matthew, initially the most skeptical, now sought Ryker's approval and advice. One evening, as Ryker taught the boys to play checkers by the fire, Joseph climbed into his lap without hesitation, leaning against his chest as if he belonged there. "Pa, can you tell us a story?" he asked sleepily. The room went still. Lucy froze at the stove and Matthew's head snapped up from the game. Ryker's expression was unreadable as he looked down at the little boy. "Joseph," Lucy said carefully, "Mr. Nash isn't— It's all right," Ryker interrupted gently. "I don't mind." He shifted Joseph more comfortably on his lap. "What kind of story would you like, little man?" Joseph yawned. "One about cowboys." As Ryker began a tale about a cattle drive across the Badlands, Lucy watched her other son's reactions. William and the twins seemed unbothered, but Matthew's face was a storm of conflicting emotions. When the story ended, he abruptly stood and went outside, letting the door slam behind him. Lucy started to follow, but Ryker shook his head. "Let me," he said, settling Joseph beside Daniel on the rug. She hesitated, then nodded. Some conversations needed to happen between men, even when one was still a boy. Ryker found Matthew by the woodpile, angrily splitting kindling with his new knife. "Mighty cold to be out here without a coat," Ryker observed, leaning against the cabin wall. Matthew didn't look up. "I'm fine." "You're angry," Ryker corrected, "and you've got every right to be." That made the boy pause. "I do? Sure." Ryker picked up a piece of wood, turning it in his hands. "Joseph calling me Pa, that must have hurt something fierce." Matthew's shoulders sagged. "He shouldn't forget our real Pa so easy." "I don't think he has," Ryker said carefully, "but he's mighty young and it's been hard months for all of you." "You're not trying to replace him?" Matthew asked, finally meeting Ryker's eyes. "No one could replace your Pa, son, not ever." Ryker's voice was firm. "The fact is, your Pa was a good man who raised fine boys. That's plain to see. I'm just trying to help your Ma keep his family safe until you're all old enough to do it yourselves." Matthew considered this, his young face solemn in the moonlight. "I miss him, every day." "Of course you do, and that's as it should be." "But Joseph is forgetting." Ryker shook his head. "He's not forgetting, he's just trying to make sense of his world. Little ones need to feel safe." He paused. "I'll talk to him, explain things." "No," Matthew said after a moment. "Don't make him feel bad, it's not his fault." Ryker felt a surge of pride at the boy's maturity. "You're a good brother, Matthew Evans. Your Pa would be mighty proud of the man you're becoming." They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Ryker added, "I lost my Pa when I was 20. There are still days I wish I could ask his advice or hear his laugh. That never goes away, and it shouldn't." Matthew nodded, understanding passing between them. "We should go in before Ma worries." As winter slowly released its grip on the land, subtle changes occurred in the Evans household. Lucy found herself watching for Ryker's return whenever he was away, her heart lifting at the sight of his tall figure cresting the hill. The boys now included him naturally in their conversations about the future, what they would plant in spring, how they would expand the chicken coop, which calf would be born first when their cow delivered. March brought the first hints of spring, and with it, the unspoken question of what would happen when Ryker continued his journey north. Lucy found herself avoiding the subject, though she knew it weighed on all their minds. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset after the boys were in bed, Ryker finally broached the topic. "Spring's coming fast," he observed. Lucy nodded, her hands tightening around her shawl. "The passes will be clear soon. Been thinking about that." He turned to face her. "About moving on." Her heart sank, though she'd been expecting this. You've been more than fair with your help, Ryker. We wouldn't have survived without you, but we understand you have your own plans." He was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the fading light. "My plans have changed somewhat since winter." Lucy looked up, a flicker of hope in her chest. "How so?" "When I rode onto your land that day, I was just passing through, had my heart set on that spread up north." He paused. "But now I'm thinking there's good land right here that needs working. A family that might need a hand for more than just a season." Lucy's breath caught. "Ryker, what are you saying?" He took her hand gently in his. "I'm saying I care for you, Lucy Evans. For your boys, too, more than I thought possible." His voice grew softer. "I know it hasn't been long since you lost James, and I'd never presume to take his place. But if you could see your way to letting me stay on, maybe build something here together." Tears filled Lucy's eyes. "The boys have grown so attached to you, and I to them," he replied. "But it's not just the boys I'm asking about, Lucy." She looked down at their joined hands, then back to his earnest face. "I never expected to feel this way again," she admitted. "After James died, I thought that part of my life was over. And now I find myself watching the road when you're gone, counting the hours until you return." Her voice trembled. "It frightens me how quickly you've become essential to us." Ryker's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "I don't want to rush you, Lucy. I'm willing to wait, to give you time." "Time for what?" "Time, to be sure, to know your own heart." He smiled softly. "I already know mine." Lucy looked out over the land, her land, James's land, now showing the first green shoots of spring. The grief was still there, a quiet presence in her heart, but alongside it had grown something new. Hope, possibility, and feelings for this man who had appeared when they needed him most. "I don't need more time," she said finally, turning back to him. "The boys need you, I need you. Not just as a hired hand or a friend, but—" She faltered, suddenly shy. Ryker lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I love you, Lucy Evans. Have since that night by the fire when you reached for my hand." "I love you too," she whispered, the words both strange and right on her tongue. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, she met him halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that held promise, tenderness, and the start of something precious. When they parted, Lucy rested her forehead against his. "The boys will have questions. We'll answer them together," he replied, "one day at a time." April brought renewal to the land and to the Evans family. Lucy and Ryker were married in a simple ceremony in Sweetwater, with her sons as their only attendants. Matthew stood proud as his mother's witness, having given his blessing with solemn maturity beyond his years. "Pa would want you to be happy, Ma," he had told her when she worried about moving forward too quickly. "And Ryker's a good man." The town preacher spoke words about new beginnings and second chances that brought tears to Lucy's eyes. When it came time for the vows, Ryker added his own promise to the traditional words. "I vow to honor the memory of the man who came before me," he said, his gaze including all 5 boys who stood watching, "and to cherish the family he created with the same devotion I offer their mother." That night, after the boys were asleep and husband and wife were finally alone, Lucy shared her own fears. "I worry sometimes that I'm betraying James by being happy again so soon," she confessed as they lay together in what was now their bedroom. Ryker gathered her close. "Your James strikes me as the kind of man who would want exactly this for you and the boys' safety, happiness, and love. Honoring his memory doesn't mean living in grief forever." She nodded against his chest. "The day you rode up, I was wondering how we would survive until spring. Now here we are, planning the future." "A good future," he promised, kissing her forehead, "with 6 gardens to plant instead of 5. Lucy looked up, puzzled. 6? His smile was gentle, 1 for each boy, including Joseph. "He may call me Pa now, but I want him to know his birth father's legacy lives on in everything he grows." Tears filled Lucy's eyes at the thoughtfulness of this man who had become so central to their lives. "How did we get so lucky?" "I'm the lucky one," Ryker corrected. "Riding past your cabin was the best wrong turn I ever took." As spring bloomed into summer, the Evans-Nash homestead flourished. With Ryker's knowledge of cattle and Lucy's gardening skills, they expanded their small herd and planted crops that promised a bountiful harvest. The boys thrived under the balance of Lucy's gentle nurturing and Ryker's patient guidance. Joseph continued to call Ryker Pa, but now understood the special place his birth father held in their family's history. The other boys found their own ways to relate to their new father figure, Matthew as an apprentice in ranching, William as a partner in carpentry projects, and the twins as eager students of his stories and songs. By the time autumn painted the Wyoming landscape in gold and crimson, another change had come to their family. Lucy's rounded belly promised a new arrival before winter returned a child who would know only this blended family filled with love and memories of those who had gone before. On a crisp October evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the boys play in the yard, Ryker placed his hand over the spot where their baby kicked. "Did you ever imagine when I rode up that day that we'd be here now?" he asked. Lucy covered his hand with hers. "Not once. I was just trying to survive each day. And now," she smiled, leaning against his shoulder, "now I'm looking forward to all the days to come." As the sun set over the plains, casting long shadows across the land that had witnessed both their greatest sorrows and their newfound joy, Lucy reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought Ryker Nash to their door that winter day. What had begun as survival had transformed into something far more precious, a second chance at love, and a family rebuilt from grief into happiness. The wind still howled across the Wyoming territory, but within the walls of their home, Lucy and Ryker had created a shelter strong enough to weather any storm. Together with the 5 boys who connected their past to their future, they had found not just survival, but a life rich with promise and love.